I'm delighted to have you all. My name is Angie Fiesel. I'm the Director of Changemaker Campus with Ashoka U, and I'm also the lead for the Senior Leaders Experience. While we and our co-host, the University of St. Thomas, had really hoped to welcome you all physically to Minneapolis, we are delighted that you have joined us in this pivot to our first ever virtual exchange. I am actually joining you all from Northern Virginia, the Washington, D.C. metro area in the United States. Ashoka U is located on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation, the Natchitoches Nation and specifically, which then became part of the Piscataway Nation. We invite you to reflect upon the land where you are, its unique history, its first peoples, and the indigenous people that call it home. This virtual gathering that we're in today is really an opportunity for each one of us to reflect on current systems that may be perpetuating inequality or injustice, to really reimagine future systems that will work for the good of all. And so as we kind of enter this space together, we invite you to consider that as a leader, as a change maker, as you're envisioning the role that you can play in creating systems that work for others. With that as kind of a physical and metaphorical grounding for our time together, I'd like to just briefly introduce a little bit about Ashoka U and the purpose of our time together in the next 2 days. For those of you whose first experiences with Ashoka U is today, Ashoka U was founded in 2008 by co-founder, executive director Morena Kim, who you're going to get to meet here in a few minutes. And really with a belief in higher education and its power for social impact. And so over the last 12 years, we have worked with over 500 campuses, colleges, and universities who are committed to embedding social innovation and change making into not only the educational offerings and pathways, but also into the institution's DNA. And its strategies, structures, and cultures. Ultimately, our hope is that we will see millions of change makers leaving schools and leading in a time of uncertainty for more just systems in the future. When we first launched the Senior Leaders Experience itself, that was about 12 years ago, or I'm sorry, about 7 years ago. I guess it was 2013. At the exchange at the University of San Diego. And it really started as an intimate gathering of presidents and provosts from changemaker campuses, specifically to create a space for them to share with peers, whether that be about how to embed innovation and change making into the academics, or whether it was, best practices and strategy or roles in community, but just giving a space for that peer kind of level sharing, dialogue, and collaboration. 7 years later, we find ourselves now with increased demand for really a broad interest across multiple levels of leadership and institutional types. And so this experience that you're joining today is about 65 participants across our 2-day track and from lots of different nations. I think we have about 8 different countries represented. And we'll be dialing in at different time zones, of course, for folks. As far as role type, we have a plethora of institutional types and roles. So you are 65 people with the titles of Associate Dean. We've got Vice Presidents, whether that be of Academic Affairs and Provost, or Vice Presidents of Student Affairs and Marketing, Presidents, Trustees, a whole range of leader types from higher ed. In addition to that, another innovation from this year is that we have responded to the requests from senior leaders in the past who have said, in addition to meeting with our peers, we really want to have these important conversations with other innovators and thought leaders in the space of higher ed. And so we're delighted that amongst this 65 person cohort, we also have Ashoka Fellows joining us today who are working in the space of higher ed or education itself. We have some thought partners and ecosystem builders that work with higher ed. I won't name them all. You can look in the program. There are some spotlights for our panelists, as well as there's a list in the attendee listing that you can get a sense for really who's in our virtual room together. We're also pleased to welcome a few folks from the media. We have a senior writer from Chronicle of Higher Education, an editor from Stanford Social Innovation Review. And I've already introduced my colleagues from Ashoka U. I also want to welcome Diana Wells from Ashoka. She's President Emerita and also a former trustee from Brown University. And so we're delighted to have her joining us today. So with that, where do we find ourselves with today's experience, the senior leaders experience? What are we hoping to accomplish? First, we have to acknowledge that we are in the midst of a global pandemic and that we are experiencing some of the most dynamic and challenging times that many of us have experienced in our lives. As senior leaders on campuses, you have been facing and called upon to make rapid fire decisions for the health and safety of all, for continuity of education, for engagement and support to your communities, and you're facing unprecedented amounts of change. And so we honor and appreciate that set of circumstances, and we appreciate that you would spend a few hours with us today and tomorrow. In this time together, we really just want to create a space where you can briefly and momentarily step away from that crisis and have a chance to kind of catch your breath and pause and hopefully reflect and make sense of what is going on, as well as to be thoughtful about the role that you can play in change going forward. So today, our starting point is really the theme of making sense of the changing landscape and really helping you reconnect with kind of your inner purpose at a time when resiliency is being tested, to give you a sense of reconnecting with what drives you, what got you in this game of higher education, and what contributions you want to make. To also connect with the external drivers of change, the trends that are pressuring, and how that might impact the changes that you want to affect on your campus going forward, and how innovation and change making can be a part of equipping you for that. Tomorrow, we'll move into a little bit more of a pragmatic space of then appreciating and thinking through what are the systems on our campuses or the systems across the sector of higher education that we do want to be intentional about changing, and that do need to be rewired for a better educational system and for better outcomes for the good of all. And then we'll talk about the kind of leadership that is required to be a systems change leader, and some of the latest research and some of the applications of that in the space of higher education. So with that as our set of goals and that we're seeking to accomplish over the next 2 days, we also want to create a container and a space where everyone just feels safe and included and valued. We, as I mentioned, are a diverse range of folks coming from many different national contexts and cultures, institutional types, role types, personal identities, worldviews. We also are coming at a time that's really stressful. And so we appreciate that emotions are heightened. We also have been having some huddles with folks in our network over the last couple of weeks, and it has just made even more abundantly clear how unique every one of our experiences are of the global pandemic, and that is shaped by geographically our location, where we're at, our institutional type, the needs of our student bodies and communities, and our own family circumstances. And so we just want to honor that as we create a space together, and we ask that you would help us to uphold the exchange values, which I'm going to ask Morena to also post to our chat room here in a minute, so that as we engage with each other, whether that be through the chat function, whether that be through breakout rooms or questions and answers with our panelists, that we would do so with an extra dose of sensitivity and active listening, with really demonstrating a deep empathy one for another, of just showing respect and helping people feel included and welcome to be authentic. And so we ask that you would help us to uphold those values as we engage with one another. We're also going to try to keep this space physically safe, as it were, from any kind of external folks coming in during this phenomena of Zoom bombing. So we have a couple of co-hosts that are helping to try to mitigate if we have any disruptions that are unwelcome we will try to work very quickly to alleviate that and to just dismiss folks if needed. But now I have the happy pleasure of just extending deep gratitude to our sponsors. And so at this time, I would like to formally express our appreciation from Ashoka U to our co-host, the University of St. Thomas, who's been a phenomenal partner for over a year planning this event, and especially in these last 6 weeks where we've had to go virtual. So with that, I'm going to turn it over and invite the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, Wendy Wyatt, to make a few comments.
Thank you, Angie. On behalf of the University of St. Thomas community, welcome all to the Senior Leaders Experience. By my count, we have participants from 47 different organizations joining us during these 2 days. I surely would have preferred, as I'm sure you would have, to welcome you in person to what has been my home for the past 17 years, the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul and the University of St. Thomas. But I'm grateful we can connect virtually. Earlier this week, when I was perusing the website for the exchange, I was reminded of the gathering's core values: authenticity, belonging, optimism, inclusion, generosity, courage, and respect. Those always resonate with me, but they strike a particular chord during these times. When we think about what brought us here today, I'm guessing many of you share stories similar to mine. I arrived at St. Thomas in 2003 as a brand new media ethics professor and someone committed to working with my students and the journalism community to help make the world a better place. At that time, I didn't have any of the language around change making and only a developing set of skills and experiences to act on that commitment. But something about St. Thomas made me believe it was a good fit to jump in, to try things, to admittedly make mistakes, and to learn a lot along the way. When our president, Julie Sullivan, arrived in 2013 and connected us with Ashoka, I felt, and I know many of my colleagues felt, that we had found the perfect partners in this adventure. So thank you for joining us today and tomorrow to share, to learn, to grow, and yes, to experience. Finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues at St. Thomas who worked with Ashoka U to develop this year's exchange theme: building bridges, change making for the common good. The bridges were intended to evoke how the land that St. Thomas occupies is defined by the water that runs through it. The name of our state is derived from the words Minnesota Makoche, which means the land where the water reflects the clouds. Little did we know that the building bridges portion of our theme would also refer metaphorically to the technological networks that are bringing us together today. Enjoy these 2 days, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I also would love to invite Brent Martini to make a few remarks. Brent is the sponsor for the Senior Leaders Experience specifically. Brent is the founder of Martini Education and Trust. Brent, over to you.
Thanks, Angie. First of all, applause and kudos to the Ashoka team for what was a fairly heavy and unexpected lift over the last few weeks. And I thought maybe today the most important thing to do was set a perspective. But the second thing I'd really like to do is applaud whoever's on this call who actually found a way to create a possibility for themselves and take themselves out of this fire drill, this unknown, and look for opportunities to continue to learn and discover and bring that learning from fellow change makers and folks dealing with similar things to tomorrow or a couple days from now, with maybe even more ideas, ammunition, creativity to do that which they have to do next. So I applaud your ability to actually see the opportunity. For me, on the perspective, I'd like to I'm a glass half full person. I look for the optimism in everything. I believe in the good of things, of people. And I'd like to just try on, how about this was a gift? This was the gift of unfreezing everything that we know to be, whether it's in education, university, in the healthcare system, in anything. And often that's not easily done when we're cruising along with our own parameters, our own guidelines, our guideposts, which is why we often get incremental change. It's often risky for leaders to try something new, especially when things are going pretty well. I think we know in any change management process, if there's a crisis or a terrible performance or a real reason to change, we can do that. when things are going pretty decently, we have a tendency to take maybe less risk, unless a new player comes into a world. Take the New York City taxi world, bring Uber, yes, a massive change, but for many years defined by, let's just keep doing what we're doing. So this is a unique time where we're allowed to think outside the box, in fact, have to. Consider not what has been and what always has, what we've looked at as reasonable and maybe incremental, and everything's up in the air, which is actually a gift because it gives us a chance to think about other things. It gives us a chance to try things. It actually, in my world, takes away some of the risk of going for it, things that you and your teams have thought about, why not? I mean, imagine if Morena and Angie had come to the team and said, hey, listen, 30 days out, we'd like to try going virtual. Forget the conference we were gonna do, let's go virtual. Unheard of. Why would you do that? Too hard, too risky. Can't even think that way. You're crazy. Guess what? You did it. So to me as a leader, I feel a little bit, and I'm not in a position like all of you, where I have thousands of people looking for my leadership, but I know one thing, you got an amazing team around you, you always have. This is the opportunity to think outside the box. And why I'm excited about this particular conference is our trust is really designed to put wind in the sails of those who are doing holistic education. Those who are not just doing their great competence. We know there's great accounting, finance, environmental studies, but bringing to that the ESG and most importantly, the human side, the end. So you can be a great accountant, but now you can be a great accountant with great social skills and sustainability as a part of your accounting ledger. You can be a great finance person, but you can do it with good governance and inclusion, which is now part of the program, and sustainability. Why not? So we're not educators. We're those who know who the educators are, who are doing good work, and Carrie, my job is to find them and look for ways to empower holistic education and opportunities for young people. Young people used to be defined as just graduating college, now defined as to their 30s. But our whole point really is to empower that which you're doing, and in particular, you, the leadership group, which is why we picked sponsorship with Ashoka, because the last 5 years of my participation with Ashoka has changed my entire life, including my purpose and including my 17-year-old daughter's future, who's now going to go to Tulane, because 5 years ago I was at a Ashoka conference and understood what Tulane was all about, which inspired me. So our goal is really to give you whatever else we can, and through Ashoka we can reach the senior leadership group who's going to influence the education of young people. So it's a privilege to just be able to make this happen in person or virtually, but I'm actually excited about what's next because we get to be maybe a little less incremental than we ever were. So I applaud you all being here. I have empathy for your intense work that you're doing. And the fact that you're here to consider new ideas is brilliant. And that's really what gives me the motivation to know I'm in the right place with the right people and that Carrie and I are onto things and we need to look for more. So good luck with all that. And looking forward to learning more so I can be a better leader as well.
Thank you so much, Brent and Wendy. We couldn't do this without your support and without your inspiration and your leadership. So thank you very much. I'm now going to introduce Ashoka U's Morena Kim. She is the Executive Director. She's going to provide a little bit of framing remarks for the senior leaders experience as we start to navigate into a space of community building as well.
Yeah, so gosh, I'm, sitting here with a very warm feeling in my belly. I'm actually tremendously excited for the next couple of days. It actually feels like in the midst of everything turning upside down, that this is the community, this community of campus leaders and the campuses that we've been working to build into a community for the past decade or more is really a place of grounding. And so I actually hope that there's some sense of grounding that all of you also get. And also, as I've just been trying to make sense of this myself, I actually think it's just a fascinating time to be a leader, but also I think to be a human. And I actually think it has implications for what does it mean to be a human leader. And when I think about change making, the values and the mindsets and the attributes, I do think that there is something inherently human about being a leader that has to be part of a change process. And a big part of it is that you are changing in addition to the environment around you changing, in addition to the structures, the strategies, the curriculum, the programs that you lead. And so one thing I just wanted to comment on, in addition to, honestly, the biggest part of my message is just, I am so inspired by all of you, and I commend you for the countless hours you're probably putting in right now and the learning curves that you had not anticipated you would be part of and the learning curves that all of your faculty and staff all around you are also part of. But on the flip side, this actually means that you are students. Like, you are probably in a moment of accelerated learning and growth in order to be able to lead in this moment that is unprecedented. So I actually just, I think probably your heads are exploding because there's so much new information and so many new skills that you are acquiring. But I want to say, just to bring back the link between the human and the leadership, I actually think now is the moment, especially when all of the things that we know are flipping inside out and upside down. It's actually the building deeper relationships with the people around you, the leaders that are working alongside you. And so, as Wendy mentioned, like, there's an opportunity for new partnerships, but also I think just grounding in the relationships that sustain you to give you energy in order for you to be able to lead. And so I think this is a challenging moment, but it is also a moment where the growth that you are probably experiencing as a person and as a leader will actually serve you for the decades to come. And it's also a moment where how you look back on this time, that probably will be somewhat of a blur because you're barely sleeping and there's so much intensity, will actually be a bit of a turning point in terms of how you view your own leadership development and your own institutions development. So again, back to where I started, I do hope that this experience for the next couple of days can be a place of grounding and inspiration and permission for you to be able to learn in a supportive, structured way, because you are being called upon at newer levels of challenge and newer levels of leadership than you've probably ever experienced in your entire career. And we don't have the answers. So just to put it out there, we are not going to give you all the answers, because there literally are no answers for something that has never happened before. But what I can say is that if I've learned anything from, over a decade with Ashoka and Ashoka U, we are a community of learners and leaders and innovators. And what we can do is provide a space where we can ask questions and share parts of solutions and new models and emergent trends, so that we can help get smarter, faster, and learn better, so that as we all collectively navigate through this uncertainty and this major change, that we'll all figure out better answers together. And then finally, this is not just the only touch point that we hope to have with all of you. We actually see this as one of many. So again, huge thanks to Brent Martini. He is supporting us to do an ongoing series of conversations with senior leaders after the exchange. So over the next several months, what we hope to do is continue conversations that start here, that seem to have momentum and where you want to go deeper. That we also want to start new conversations that we didn't have time to cover. And so we are mostly in listening and learning mode. We want to figure out how we can best serve this community of leaders. And we see this as just a hugely important time to double down on being a source of inspiration, support, and collaborative learning to the leaders who are probably going to shape the next iteration of higher education for decades and generations to come. So we're here, and please, if you have any ideas how we can better support you, we are here on standby, and we look forward to this being one of many conversations as part of an ongoing community.
Thank you, Morena. And speaking of conversations, that's where we're headed next. Really, the bulk of the time that we spend now will be a networking moment, a chance for you to get to know one another. The purpose of our kind of next 30-minute exercise is really about breadth of relationship. We have shared with you that there are and a diverse range of folks that are joining us. And we want you to get a sampling of that. We want you to get to experience and meet and connect with your peers and with lots of your peers. And so we're actually going to do 3 rounds of networking in virtual breakout rooms. For each round, we'll have about 9 minutes each or thereabouts. We'll have groups of about 4 people. And what we're asking you to do is simply get to know each other. We're going to put here in a minute in the chat box a simple prompt, which is, you know, introduce yourselves, your institution, your role, your location, and maybe respond to the prompt of, as a leader, how have things been going for you, and what's on your mind. It's really just a chance to get to know each other. So our hope is that over the course of 3 rounds, you will have gotten to know maybe a good 9 people, and really provide a good foundation for connecting with each other offline, or connecting with each other in one of our last sessions. And so just to provide kind of a contrast, in this experience, we're looking for breadth. So the conversations are not quite as deep, but there are more of them. In our last session of the Senior Leaders Experience tomorrow, we're going to be doing peer insight exchanges. And in that space, we're going to go deeper. We're going to have you have deeper conversations, longer time frame, to really be able to kind of troubleshoot, to bring a challenge that's on your mind that you're facing, that you want to connect with peers around and have some deeper conversations around. So just to give you a bit of a trailer for that and what's coming. But before we do so, I'm actually going to just work on breaking us out now. And if you'll just bear with me for 1 or 2 minutes, you can be looking at that prompt, and you can kind of be thinking through how you might be introducing yourself. All right, well, thank you all so much for being a part of this opening session. I would invite, if you wanted to share in the chat function, you're welcome to. Maybe kind of one word of how you're feeling, or a key insight that you took away from your time and getting to know folks. Feel free to use that. It'd be great to kind of see your thoughts there. And in the meantime, I'm actually going to administer a poll. So one of the great things about Zoom, if you haven't experienced this yet, is it does have a poll function. And so I'm going to launch that poll for you now. And we would love to invite your feedback on this session. And feel free to take the poll, and feel free to add any final comments in the chat before we close out with final announcements. Fabulous. And as we start to transition to close out this session, I want to thank you all for your participation. Thank you for, as we experiment and get comfortable with the technology and the wonderful options that we have. I'd like to also just remind you that the next session is our keynote for the exchange. It's going to start at 12:30 Eastern time zone. So again, that's 12:30. It is the Hands in the Crisis, Eyes to the Future. So it's a very timely and relevant topic for all of us today. We will see you, if you want to get connected again, we'll see you on the next SLE. In the meantime, enjoy the exchange and have a great one.